it only took until episode 25 to actually talk directly on the financial states of being. Thanks for coming on, Naj, for helping me with that.
No
What
worries, anytime.
what did we get into that caught your attention that you enjoyed?
So the money mindset around and actually like looking at sort of what your financial goals are. I think a lot of the social justice around money as well, around how people think it's, it's not, it doesn't, how I hope people will take from it that money doesn't have to be something exploitative and different for what's wealthy is different for everybody, but you have to have an idea for you to get what you actually want.
For sure. I think there's an element of future self that you got into that I really enjoyed as well.
Yeah.
That helping people to think about who they are now and who they'd like to be and what value looks like kind of along that journey
Yeah.
was something that really stood out for me.
But and you know what, actually as well, I'd say hearing the amount of crossover there is between sort of the money coaching stuff that I do and the coaching and the physical coaching that you do, there's so much crossover. It's just a different output. But I do now, I'm really starting to buy into the fact that there are constellations of traits and emotional, spiritual states that produce good outcomes in different areas. And you have to concentrate on that sort of bedrock. You have to be teachable. You have to have humility. You have to question as well, though. You can listen and question, but you have to be resilient, but you also have to buy in, and that involves hope. That involves that things can get better, things can change, and as we all do.
Invest is the word throughout this, isn't it? Whether it's in
Yeah.
yourself or in ethical stocks or future. Yeah, there's a lot to be said for taking the time to think about what the future is going to look like. All right. I'll drop all of Naj's links in the description. Go check him out on LinkedIn. And if you haven't liked, followed, commented, all of that good stuff, make sure to do it and we'll get into the episode.
Cheers, dude.
All right, Naj, you help people with financial trauma. What does that look like to you?
So financial trauma is like an overall part of like financial wellness. It's quite a delicate thing. I don't think a lot of people know about it, and I wouldn't say it's like. I think first it's an educational piece because I don't think a lot of people know what it is and wouldn't associate finance with trauma. But it's like so from my experience, so in 2023 I had sepsis, 2 months off work, like really nearly died, and then I was paralyzed, and then out of work came the fact that you're trying to recover, but then you haven't got any money. And it's the thing of actually and you could say, well, you concentrate on getting your health, but when you've got kids and you've got, bills and a mortgage and all those other things, it's not as easy as, oh, I'm just not going to worry about it. And that the finance part of being very scared about money is it's kind of like a hypervigilance. It could be that growing up, there was perhaps maybe you've grown up in poverty or your parents lost a house or be off the back of a divorce. And it's basically just like reframing what's happened and coming to terms with it because people will be quite avoidant of dealing with money and it's getting to recognize that kind of thing. I should say as well that I'm not like a therapist. I just sort of recognize that sort of, maybe sort of reframe some issues, but it's more coaching. It's coaching. It's definitely not therapy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically just addressing the blockers that are stopping you dealing with your money.
Because I'm aware of you as a financial advisor, but when
Yeah.
we caught up before, I think you brought this word trauma into it, and I'd not considered trauma with finance at all. And as you've already alluded to, there have been moments in your life that seem to have brought you to this point. So I think whether we talk about you as a coach or as a financial advisor, how did you get to where you are now for the conversation that we're about to have?
So I've had a very varied career. I think I used to be a solicitor, and when I got married, it wasn't the career for me, and I was like, I'm going to stop now. And all the usual things about like, will everyone think about I've done all this training and I'm changing or no one was thinking about me. Like they're all too busy living their own lives, and that was all like the whole head trash thing. And I started a small little estate planning practice, but I got into financial advice. So when COVID hit, I just used the time and I took the plunge and did the qualifications, and then I've always been involved in sort of like coaching. So I did a qualification, and from there it just sort of really, when I started my business, I wanted it to be about financial wellness, not just about investing people's money, because the stats on financial literacy in the UK are awful. They're really not good. We're like 73% of the UK's population, and this is a study done in 2024. they fall below the accepted standard for financial literacy. It's
What?
a it's like it's a really kind of like knowledge of like debt, knowledge of financial products, not how to budget, the basics, and that's a really scary thing. So, and it's the wellness aspect of how you handle your money. I don't think it's really talked about.
No, not at all. So what would make a person financially literate?
Just but basically just the basics of like trying to budget. So standard people, we advise people to aim for is to have 50% of your earnings go on your essentials and your day-to-day living. 30% will go on, in non-essentials, enjoying your life, and 20% should be saved. Now, it's one thing to tell someone that, which is what a usual financial advisor does. Coaching actually gets them to do it because it's the bridge between what telling people what they should do and actually helping them to do it. I suppose like in your job, like everyone knows, broadly speaking, they should eat healthily and exercise a certain amount. The knowledge and then the emotional attachment to doing it is they're two different things. Like they're two different things. And actually sometimes it's about help, sometimes it's about like just having a non-judgmental person to be there for you to say, oh, look, what's going on. And someone will say they screwed up, which I disagree with. I think, I want to always say to people is it's your money, you do what you want with it.
Mm.
But, there are, depending on what you want to achieve or how you want to feel about your money, there are certain decisions that you can make and we can look at and we can uncover. Um, but it's basically to answer the question I think more succinctly is getting involved in how people deal with money as opposed to just giving them instructions about what to do with money.
That's interesting. So I think from the coaching standpoint that you make, I could give somebody a plan. And plans have been really popular this year because I think people maybe look at the cost of coaching and think it's just too much. I can't afford that. But if somebody just tells me what to do, then that's helpful. However, I know that the people who get the best results typically have the plan, but then also the conversations in between. And, what did you actually do? How did that feel? Do you think that you're going to be able to do what I'm suggesting for you next? And the bits there could be, what's your accessibility like in the gym? Do you actually have access to all of the kit that I'm asking you to use? Are you able to commit 3 days a week or 3 hours a week to completing this plan? Or actually, do you have family events coming? Do you have kids that you need to think about, picking them up, dropping them off from school? Are you studying at the moment? What's getting in the way of you actually doing this plan? And then if we're pushing it to the next level, how is your food? Because a lot of people will think to get in shape is just about the gym, but actually, are you walking enough? If you can't
Yeah.
walk, are you rolling enough? Are you actually eating things that support having energy and focus and concentration and building muscle? If we were to talk then about the difference between giving somebody the plan from a financial perspective and then coaching them through it, I would imagine that some of the things I've said probably ring true for what you'd follow up on with your plans.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things of like people, especially in finance, and it's one of those areas where people that are good at it can sometimes be a bit condescending to people that aren't good at it. And that doesn't help. So like, well, you really should be saving more. That's not going to motivate someone, is it really? Like, I'm not being funny, but everybody knows on a level that they should save more. But there's loads of other things. Like, I do this presentation called Making Your First Mortgage Happen, and it's for companies to put on for like apprentices. Now, most of the time, a lot of them will say, I just don't see a point because it's so far out of reach. The idea of owning a home in the UK is so far out of reach, and it's really true. Like one of the stats I start with is in the 1970s, modern day equivalent of a house was about 48 grand. That's the average house price in the UK. Now it's about 268. So that's 5 times above inflation, and that's a phenomenal amount of money to find. Like, you've got to find 26, 27 grand from somewhere for a 10% deposit. Yeah, it's a lot of money to find. And, that just can seem so daunting but people need help breaking it down. So like, hold on a minute, stop for a second. Okay, you're living with your parents. Let's add value to that time. So much probably the same as like you're going, well, okay, you got an hour in the gym. What's the maximum amount you can get done in an hour? Because you just don't want to be there for an hour. Maximum value, right? Okay, 3 years, how much can you save? okay, is it consistent as well? So like exercise, the best thing is consistency. Like I always say with me, I exercise once a week or four times a week, but it usually levels out to about two. But it's at least I know I've done them. If I do one, it's still okay. But I say like, if you can't, you can save, but you've got to have some fun as well. So let's do something consistent. And after you've broken that down, you've shown them the ladders, it may be 5 years, but 5 years is better than 20, and actually people start to gain a little bit of sense of realism about it. And they break the status quo bias of I don't save. They start to build they build the habit or like just, the unconscious block to start saving.
Yeah,
Because it is a lot of people are aspirational and they want to be tied into but they just don't know how to frame it in their head, is my opinion of things. And there's a lot of psychologists support that, but it's more for me, it's practice of like talking to people and actually really giving them an idea of what they want to achieve, and actually that it is possible. Sometimes you might have to compromise on what the exact goal is at the moment, but it is still possible.
makes sense. From the relative increase that you'd need for a deposit, obviously I want to stick with the positive aspect of what you're describing, but in real terms, so we can understand how much harder it feels to save up for a deposit now. What's the relative increase in salaries in that same time? Do you know?
I don't know. Essentially, inflation's gone way above salaries
Yeah.
in the last like 20 to 30 years. Um, we also, our financial system is really complex, and more financial advisors have dropped out of the market. And there's not been, there's a combination of those things, but the fact that actually like people haven't, we've got social practices that don't really enable people to look at their financial wellness. So traditionally, men have always held the purse strings, so they have been more financially literate than women, not
Mm.
because of aptitude, just purely because no one's you know bothered to do that, which is incredibly wrong. However, as the gender pay gap has started to close, and there's a lot of work probably to be done on that, but the financial literacy gap has not closed. So it's led to increased debt in women, for example, less that women are more likely to put into cash accounts where they don't get interest than invest in ISAs and pensions, which means that they'll get not only interest or they'll get growth, but they'll get tax relief.
Mm.
So it's loads of things that actually that there's a perfect thumb. It's not just about the fact that like wages haven't increased. It's about the fact that there's this perfect storm of loads of things that just haven't been taken account of. And once people, but I will say this though, the one thing I do find is once people understand what they have to do, and they understand the mechanics of what they're surrounded by, you usually see quite a rapid change in how they address like their finances and how they become motivated, which for me is great because it's a much easier client to deal with, someone that's actually along with you from the journey than you have to drag kicking and screaming. Like I mean, you must know from a coaching perspective, you can't, it's just so difficult. You just feel like, and it's demoralizing actually to have someone that I'm seeing him again, am I? Like kind of thing. It's like, well, it's nicer if they're bought into the process.
For sure. I have got an amount of experience with the click, the change, and good coaching practice. This is something that I think you'd find across my industry and probably across our industries, is that if you can get an early result that helps the client to feel good, then that's probably going to help them with buy-in. Now, if I've got a fat loss client, for instance, then ideally in the first 2 weeks, I want to get them feeling differently. We might not be able to get them to look different in 2 weeks, but if maybe they feel like, oh, actually training's good, like I like this level of soreness, or I didn't expect to enjoy this as much, or you introduce new food, or you put a twist on a meal that they already like, and they realize that actually eating clean, eating healthy isn't that difficult. It's just a little change, but it has this feeling that they've not had in a while or maybe had ever. Then that means that typically, in 10 weeks' time, they're going to look at and feel fantastic in a way that maybe exceeded expectation. What would that translate to in finance? What do you look for quick wins early on as well? How does it work for you?
So this is really weird. So when I started my business, probably coming up to 18 months, but in the 4 months before I got authorized, I really honed in on coaching people with just general money issues about how they handle money. And I'm neurodiverse, so I've got ADHD, and a lot of people with ADHD and autism suffer with debt and poor money management, purely because there are issues in terms of marketing and impulse buying, but there's also the financial system's just not set up for people who are neurodiverse. But there was one client, this one lady, and she was so smart. She used to head up she worked for a charity. She'd been earning like £70,000 a year, but got herself into a lot of debt. And there was a huge hangover of like how she came out of her divorce and the money associated with that and the shame that I was like,
Mm.
and first thing I said to her, I said, look, you've had two kids, you come out this, no one's support. Has anyone ever said to you, look, just how well you've done? Okay, it's not perfect. I'm not going to lie to you and say you've not been in debt, but let's look at the situation for a second and consider it in the wider context. You've still got you've still managed to build a career. You're building a coach. That's still a massive thing. And the problem wasn't earning money for her. It was how she felt when she spent it. But one thing she did, she was always either going out for fancy meals and paying for everybody or buying delivery. But her own food, she'd have like a pot noodle and eat over the sink, which was a massive contradiction. I was like, so I just said, you know what? Create a ritual for you to eat. Just something by your own, whatever it is, by your own special plate, by your own foot, something that makes it special. And and actually she really got into it. She really got into it. This is my time in the day where I just, without the kids, without anything. And that was the win. Like she learned to actually just go, you know what, actually I don't have to spend money on people or this just to get, I can actually make something nice and enjoy the ritual of doing this. That wasn't a weight loss thing, but she really got into it and she started like that there. That's like 600 quid a month just back in the account. It's a serious amount of money like people spend. But also, I said, look, I want you to save £1 a week. Open up a little sub account in your current account, put it as savings. Just put £1 a week in it, just a pound, and because it just breaks that habit of we don't do this anymore, we don't save. And before you know it, like 4 weeks later, she's like, "Oh, I found like a couple hundred quid actually. I could just shave off this." Just almost went the other way, where she was like, "I'm not going to spend. I'm not spending anything." I was like, "You've got to be reasonable with it, because be consistent." But she wrote me this lovely letter about how it really helped her and reframe money. She felt better about her job and better about the business she was starting. And that quick win early on, because I think, to be honest as well, I was still quite skeptical about my ability to think on my feet, because it was a process I was following before. Whereas actually, I think that was probably one of the first times where I was like, actually build it as a more person centric like coaching process, because we've all got processes and things we lean on, and we should do, because in my opinion, because as a coach you need to know you're covering all the bases, but that's not one size fits all. That's a platform for you to go and do something, and and you to build on and to modify for each, because everyone's different. We're 100% the same but 100% different at the same time.
A feeling that I've had hearing about your client there is that shame and guilt come in different forms and in different directions.
Absolutely.
So it almost feels to me that, with this specific example, not spending on yourself, but spending on everyone else. I know people who are really generous in person, and will give as much love as is humanly possible outwards, but then not give it to themselves.
Yeah.
I had in my family people who were really concerned about money. And there was a sense of, I can't justify that, which is a phrase that I would have used at university. My mates would go out drinking maybe 4 times a week, but I would only go out once, twice. Now, for health reasons, that was probably a good thing on my part, but I wasn't able to frame it as that I don't like drinking. It was from I felt, I don't know what I felt, but it was this thing of, I'm not able to do this, or I can't do this. It was a negative framing of a thing rather than a positive. Actually, I quite like my sleep. I don't like drinking beer. I would like to be fresh for the gym in the morning, but I couldn't put it into words that were meaningful. I'm even struggling to make a point because I'm feeling the feelings rather than being able to speak them, if that kind of makes sense.
I think I've been there on this, Pep, because I'm not like a big I'm a very well practiced introvert, I think, is what someone said to me once. I was like, yeah, that's true. Quite a close friend who it's more kind of like a informal life coach that I go to as a mentor. But he said, like, you can give yourself permission just to be who you are. And sometimes people aren't just they don't get a buzz from going out and getting smashed. And that's fine. Like that's not you don't have to do that. Do
Mm.
you know what I mean? And actually, a lot of spending. Like, so when I qualified as a solicitor, like if the thing was you moved into central Manchester and you bought yourself an A series, but like it was like a 1 Series Beamer, and it's such a stupid thing to do with money. Like, I mean, you're not earning that much, but you want to look like you're earning that much. And it's actually I just bought a place in Wythenshawe, which was fairly fairly cheap at the time. But
Mm.
it did start on a side note. That started my whole fascination with this because in Wythenshawe town centre there was a payday loan shop. So there's a place where you could go and get a payday loan. And Wythenshawe was the largest council estate in Europe. And it's slowly become gentrified actually now, but I'd never seen that before. And there's where I was working like Wilmslow or Altrincham, there's no payday loan shop.
Mm.
And the reason is because people that have been born into families that have got money, they display behaviours that are consistent with good money. So the payday loan shop wouldn't be in Wythenshawe because no one will go there. But it would be in Wythenshawe because so it wouldn't be in Wilmslow because no one would go there. But it would be in Wythenshawe because they don't understand the full, you know, the full responsibility and the full impact that that loan has on
Mm.
someone. It's criminal. Like I absolutely can't believe they still exist, but they do. And but you would that sort of financial literacy thing. I was like, I've never seen that before, but why is it here?
Yeah.
Of all the people that could afford it, people in Roomshop probably can't, and yet still there's that availability there.
I think keeping up appearances is a massive phrase.
I'd love to get into that. The whole um, I feel like a contradiction sometimes because
Yeah.
on the one hand, you think financial advisor, the archetypal capitalist, like,
Mm.
when you think about it, it'd probably be the, but actually, I mean, it's not that I'm opposed to earning a buck at all. I'm really not. I have aspirations, but then there are limits to what I think were standards to which I would say, like, there needs to be a basic level. And I mean, I went traveling around Canada after university, and I met people from America, and they would like absolutely be like they could not believe that you got healthcare, and some people were virulently against it. They were like, "This
Mm.
is just socialist, communism." Like, it's not really, but it's just making sure that whatever you've done, you get some healthcare. You can at least walk into a hospital and not get fleeced by someone. There's loads of problems back in the UK with that sort of stuff. Man, the wealth divide gets bigger, and that's one of the things I do concentrate on. As it's not so much how much money people have got. A lot of studies show it's like the divide between the richest and the poorest. The bigger that gets, the more unhappier people are. Is the not the amount they've got, but the amount that the top have got versus the bottom.
Which is really interesting in the context of the conversation that I had recently out here, that the general feeling is that people might vote in ways that they do because despite the fact that this gap is growing, the American dream is that one day you could be that. One day you could have that amount of wealth. It doesn't matter how unlikely it is, that could be you if you work hard enough. But on this side of the fence, maybe what happens is that we say, okay, we won't tax the super rich because obviously the super rich are needed for our country and we all aspire to be super rich. So obviously, if you want to be super rich, when you get there, you don't want to be heavily taxed. So it doesn't make sense to tax the rich, does it? And then people might think, okay, no, it doesn't make sense. So we'll allow the super billionaires while also then not really realizing that what that means is that the people who aren't earning that amount of money will never earn that amount of money, are taxed more than they should be, and maybe fairly. And an expression that I really like in the UK that I think maybe is going transatlantic and is perhaps as political as I will get for the time being is this notion of taxing wealth and not work. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a big thing at the moment with the latest budget. Because tomorrow is the budget, and as an advisor, all I hear is like, what do you think's going to happen? And I'm like,
Mm.
well, I don't know. Like I could tell you what I think's going to come, but if it doesn't gonna, and God forbid you say I think this, and then you go and do something based on that thought, and then you come back to it didn't happen. I'm like, well, I so I usually just now say, look, I'm not going to even speculate. Let's just wait until we know what's what,
Yeah.
where is where. But the idea that we can taxation's a funny thing. I think people get very, very upset about tax. And on the
Mm.
one hand, you can say, well, the more tax you pay, the more you earn. But then on the other hand, it's like, well, I am earning this. And one of the problems in the UK is like around wealth is that actually once you get to hit certain wealth points, a lot of your money gets taken. A lot of your money gets taken on tax. And
Mm.
then people naturally will then go, well, hold on a minute, what is going on with the welfare state? Is it too big? You know, welfare states are expensive. And people start to look to more draconian ideas because people who have wealth have a rightly so probably worked very hard for it, and they have a sense of entitlement that this should be used in a certain way. But the idea that like political ideology, I don't go towards Labour, I don't go particularly towards Conservative, but I do go away from disruptive capitalism to more sort of stakeholder capitalism where you can earn a buck, but you've got to do it in the right way, and there's got to be a limit to what we do. But that's very, I find that very heartening because the amount of people when you show them say like ethical investments, not just environmentally ethical, but I don't want to invest in arms with like all the recent political strife that's going on across the world and geopolitical wars and things. I don't want to invest in arms. I don't want anything to do with it, even though it's an incredibly profitable business. And you can see it in the funds are like, you know what, thanks very much, but no. I won't invest in anything that has child labor. And actually, people, once they start to get educated on those things, they're like, actually, do you know what? I'm not comfortable in pursuing these things for wealth, even if it could grow. And that's a whole other sphere of like ethics and advice that people don't talk about. I mean, that's a separate area, I think, probably from coaching. But it's well, actually, it isn't. I do one of these exercises where I say, "What's your money manifesto?" So we write this
Mm.
document about how you use debt, how you save, becoming your future self, and it's like your personal charter of how you handle money. And you sign it, and it can change. But one of them things is like, well, what would you do for money, and what wouldn't you do for money? And people have never thought about it, but actually, like, you know what? Actually, I'm not too sure I am comfortable with like skyrocketing investments that are on the ground being handled by children in third world countries, and actually, I'm not too sure I am comfortable with like investing in arms dealers and things like that. Actually, maybe not, you know, but it's people aren't educated on these things.
Yeah. There's a great book called The Value of a Whale by Adrienne, which
Never heard of it.
it's worth a look into, published by Manchester University Press, I think. Um, and in it, Buller talks about how in the ecology of an ocean, when a whale dies, the ocean benefits
Hmm.
in the sense of everything from the bottom up in the food pyramid gets something from that. Yeah. So all of the nutrients that this thing is consumed are then put back in. So you have from the microbes up into the sharks, everybody gets to eat. And maybe my take from that is that sadly, when whales die in the economy as opposed to the ecology, that kind of redistribution doesn't really happen.
No, no.
And the point put forward is that maybe on a micro level, something we can all do, as you're saying, is to look at what we invest in and realize that, if we're thinking about the ocean and we are thinking about ecology and economy and where we choose to put our time and energy, we don't have to just making a book, as you say, it doesn't always have to come from the most profitable thing in the short term, that actually a long-term investment that could be good for the environment, could be good for more things than just your bank account is worth looking into. And, looking at green bonds, green energy, renewables, whatever it is that you choose to invest in. I'm not in your position to tell people what to invest in.
Oh yeah,
However,
and
yeah, but there are things that we can put our money into that could see a return, but not just fiscal, environmental and potentially societal.
yeah, and so yeah, there's this. I think probably it was triggered a memory. My mum was she was a psychology master, and she was incredibly intensely very very smart woman. But she gave me this book once called God's Bankers,
Mm.
and I was far too young to read it. It was like I was about 12, but it was about basically about the 1950s. The Italian government said to the Vatican, we want to tax you," and they said no. And basically they would say, well, if you try, we're going to pull all our stocks out of the market,
Mm.
everything, will essentially crash the market. So they wielded a huge amount of power, and I'm probably going to get some people emailing me some horrible emails. I'm going to say it anyway. They wielded a huge amount of power, economic power. So equivalent at the time would have been the US just causing another like depression, and the last depression led to the Second World War. So backed off. Eventually, around the 70s, they managed to actually get them to tax. So the Vatican had to release their portfolio of investments, and it was incredibly like telling. It was like, okay, I'm not going to go into it because I can't remember exactly verbatim, but they were not ethical investments, put it that way.
Mm.
It was one of the richest institutions in the world, but it pretty much a lot of things that happened that were detrimental to humanity. There was some profit there,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like, okay, this is not but it was one of the biggest things. It made it made a big wave amongst people that understood what was, not understood, but were interested to know. And it's that thing of peering behind the veil. And actually, are you comfortable? It's like the equivalent of like, do you eat the bacon, but do you know what happens to the pig? Kind of
Mm.
thing. To put it in an analogy that I sort of think of is, okay, you want the bacon, but do you know what happens to the pig?
Just using the kit that you see here, wherever I am in the world, it is a treat to put these episodes together. If you've enjoyed them, if you have found yourself watching multiple of them, then I've got a favour to ask of you. And it's not your money. It is just a second to like what you like. Maybe a couple of seconds to leave a comment on what you enjoyed, what you changed, what you might have asked the guests, and maybe to ask me to bring on somebody or to discuss a topic that you're interested in. The last thing is to subscribe if you haven't already. Most people will watch an episode, maybe watch a couple in a row, but not subscribe. And yet that could be a massive sign to all those algorithms that you are interested in what fitness and thinking is all about. So that's it. You don't need to send any money my way. I'm not asking for a cent or penny or peso from you. It is just to let me know that what we're doing is worthwhile. Or maybe let's just have a quick critique. Like I'm going to put myself on the line right now.
Go for it.
I set up a Help to Buy ISA when I was like 17, 18.
That's a good thing to do.
And I maxed it out maybe 3-4 years ago. So you could only put £12,000 into it. Like that would be the max you could get for the government to then give you a bonus on any house that you buy with it. And so I didn't put any more money into it, and it made interest of about £25 a month. So as a savings account, like that's a good amount of money each month, but it's not necessarily the best return that I could have had on that investment. But I left it alone because I thought one day I'll buy a house and that'll be a nice amount of money to start with. And then I've seen house prices rocket, and I've seen people really struggle with Help to Buy. Again, this is anecdotal, and if it's wrong, this isn't financial advice from me. But essentially, the people who looked at Help to Buy weren't happy with what they were helped to buy, if that makes sense. And my deposit now, that wouldn't count as a deposit. I'd need to double it, as you've already said. And so my take on it has been, well, it's not the best return on interest. I'm not probably going to be in a position to buy a house by myself in the UK. I've essentially broken down my whale account into a high interest savings account, but that I can access easily. And then I've spent an amount of it on this trip to America and Mexico. And basically, I've done this trip of a lifetime, 6 weeks of traveling, and it's been fantastic. And I don't regret spending that money, but I have taken from my future to put into my present in a way that I've never done before. And on a personal level, I'm really happy that I did that. But I know on a financial level, that might draw some scrutiny.
Well, so there's loads of different things there. Firstly, like starting to save is a really good thing, because anything like wrappers, like they're only ever built on your habits. So like Help to Buy ISAs, they're a great thing, and pensions are a great thing, and they give you tax relief, and government puts money in, but it will only work if someone's saving it. So that basic of like you've got something saved is a good thing. If you've taken some out and put it into an interest account that's going to give you higher amount of interest, that's still a good thing. But don't lose sight of the dream. I mean, this is probably from a coaching point of view. I'd ask you, was this something you wanted to do and you felt you had to do?
Yeah.
Like the trip. Well, then, to be honest, you probably would have done it, in my opinion. Like, if you feel like you had to do it, you're always going to be regretting. And that will lead to resentments of buying a house, and you could probably just sell it and then just go on around the road trip. And that wouldn't be a good idea. People often say, I'm never going to own a house. But then when you get below it, they're like, I have to own a house in this postcode. And it's the most expensive postcode in their area. And I'm like, well, hold on a minute. Like, my first house was not in a great state, but it was a house. And I was willing to live there because I knew that once I'd had it done up. So that kind of thing of like, well, you might not have a house. Actually, there were some schemes like where, Liverpool did this scheme where they were selling houses for £1, but they were derelict houses. And I think it was Liverpool. It was a really, and basically people bought them. You couldn't be a buy-to-let landlord, and people bought them and did them up and had to live there for about 10 years. But people were buying houses for like literally £1. But they did them up and they were derelict houses. And it doesn't have to be a house in a four-bedroom house somewhere. It can be a two-bedroom house in an area that's not as desirable. But if you get yourself together, you know, even a 5% deposit, above 5%, when mortgage rates go down, then you've got a house then. You've got an asset. Once you're on the ladder, you've got the asset. The asset starts to grow. But it's there are loads of different variables. I think like people talking, it's that the perception that everything is unattainable.
Mm.
I suppose it's a different, say, as an analogy. If one of your clients said, "I'm never going to be able to run a marathon," then it's like, well, I need to get you out of that mindset first, because you can't start a marathon with a mindset that I'm never going to be able to run a marathon.
Mm.
And I mean, I talk about entrepreneurs, we're both entrepreneurs. I'm just like, I think being delusional is a very good thing as an entrepreneur, because if you weren't incredibly delusional, you'd never start. Like, there's got to be an element, to be fun. And there's got to be an element of like, well, I'll find a way of doing it.
Mm.
And one of those ways is perhaps, looking around and going, well, I may not be able to have a really expensive house now, but I can have a cheap house. And it'll get me on the ladder and it'll get me out of the rental thing. Interesting stats around home ownership. You're more likely to suffer mental health, physical health in terms of autoimmune disease, cancer, if you rent.
Because of insurity.
Um,
It's
yeah, because the stress of like not knowing, I mean, like especially in recent years that people up the rent as interest rates go up, rental prices go up. It has to,
mm,
and the government's bringing in things now, but people have just said, well, I don't want to rent anymore, so they're pulling the rugs out. So the other problem is you've got a huge rental sector, and people decide they don't want to rent and they're selling the house. You got no home. From that perspective, for some people, attitudes are changing. But to answer your question, it's like look at the variables and can you afford something that okay might be a fixer upper, might not be in the area that you want to live in, but it'll get you on the ladder. Because once you're in it and it goes up in value, it goes up.
yeah.
You've got it then.
Something that I struggle with and maybe would push back on that with is I don't know where I want to live. And I bought a bike this year, a motorbike, because I've not had a car for a while. I've not needed a car for the past 10 years, through a combination of choosing where I lived, studying, working in different cities. I've been in a position where I've been in a privileged position to make this decision. But I also wonder if maybe this is where my sense of financial fitness comes in. If I can walk to work, that's going to be good for my general fitness, my mood, mental health, typically. And if I can walk to work, I'm not spending on a car, I'm not spending on public transport. So that's probably going to be good for me financially as well. Case in point, I worked in London for 3 years and chose to live in Waterloo. Now, Waterloo was maybe £100, £200 more expensive a month than places that were further out. But every zone that you go into where it's £100 less a month, you're then paying to take the tube into work.
Yeah.
And that would be £190, I think it was at the time, for a month pass on public transport. So already I've saved money by being closer to work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I've also improved my health outcomes because I'm not just sat on public transport going from door to door. So this is where, I looked at that and thought, right, this is a good decision for me. I definitely don't need a car for this. So I don't have a car payment either. No car, no public transport. And I'm getting to walk 50 minutes a day as a minimum, just by virtue of going to work. I have set my life up to be like that for the past 10 years and only got a bike because I'm going to London more or may want to see my family more. But a motorbike is a lot cheaper to run than a car. And I'm
Okay.
happy.
So I agree, and I know where you're coming from. So have you ever heard of the coaching process theory, marginal gains? I can't remember who it was, but it was a coach of the Olympic cycling team.
Yeah.
I thought it was groundbreaking. For those who don't know, it's like, can you get another hour's sleep, and that'll give you 2%,
Mm.
and then can you change your diet slightly, and that'll give you 3%, and all these little things added up to another 10%, which is another as an elite athlete, that 10% is huge,
Yeah.
huge, and but then apply that to what you've just been talking about. So you're saving £90 a month by actually living in Waterloo. Okay. you're buying a bike instead of a car, so you've not got a loan repayments, hire purchase, your car tax is cheaper, your insurance is cheaper. Okay, you're probably not using the bike, so let's call those aggregate savings £500 a month. Now the flip side of that is because you know your numbers. I get the impression that you know your numbers very well. Is that actually what are you doing with the £500 a month? Because if it's going in and it's spending on stuff that isn't going to leverage your financial wellness, so if it's not going into say an ISA or it's not going into something that's going to grow, then essentially you're making the sacrifice, but you're not underpinning the value you're adding by investing it.
Yeah.
It's that thing you're making the marginal gains, but you're not leveraging them by investing it or something like that. The final leg of the journey is doing something with it.
I like that. I like that a lot. Like, what are we working towards? Yeah, yeah. So I want to make a point so hopefully you feel reassured and hopefully I feel reassured. I'm putting away an amount each month into an ISA and a pension,
Cool.
because there is a return. There's government. I don't know what you'd call it. Would be government assistance or a government bonus for paying into a pension, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah. So
£100
you
or
get
more a
tax
month.
relief. Yeah, yeah. You get a tax relief on everything you put into a pension. So it's 20% of your basic rate. So £8 turns into 10, and then the rest is at 40, no, 45%,
Yeah.
40%, 45%. Sorry, excuse me. So yeah, so you get tax relief on all that stuff. If you do it from a limited company, it just happens straight away. But as a basic rate, it just turns in straight, puts it straight into the pension wrapper, which
Yeah.
is money for free. It's one of the rare occasions that HMRC give you money, which people like. Um, but yeah, it's that alone is a lot. It's a good return. Think about it as a 20% return straight away on an investment. That's a lot. 20% year on year.
Yeah.
It's a
So
huge amount.
being made aware of that in the past 2 years, I've made sure to put as much money as I can. I'm looking to put 10 to 20% of what I earn into an ISA wrapper, and pension. So obviously everything I earn as a self-employed sole trader, I put into a pension because nobody's giving me a pension. There's no
Yeah.
superannuation. I've got to do that. And seeing that the government gives tax relief on that, as you say, it's free money, basically. So it makes sense to me to have something that I won't touch for the future, absolutely fine. So I'm building that and then have a stocks and shares ISA. And there's an element of risk with that, but I'm happy with it based on, the fact that I don't have responsibilities, kids, mortgage, things to pay. Like, I know that I'm okay with that amount of risk. And in the past couple of weeks, it's dropped an amount, but the net gain over the past 5, 6 years has been huge.
So that's exactly it. And part of like all coaching starts with a goal. And
Yeah.
it's actually the same with advice, but like advice is basically telling people what to do. Coaching is asking questions and getting them to look at their own thought process. But all coaching starts with a goal. So my question is, putting it back on you, is those great things. If what's your goal with the ISA? Because if it's stocks and shares, generally they say 5 years plus, because short-term volatility will happen, but over the long term it will always go up. If you say if the client says I want to do something in 2 years' time, I'm like, well, don't put it in stocks and shares, just do a cash ISA or something like that, because I've no idea what's going to happen in 2 years' time. It might
Mm.
drop like a stone. But 20 years' time, you can reasonably say with a degree of certainty that it's going to go up. So, but it's good to save anyway. And you are absolutely right. There are things to do. But the one thing is having an emergency account. So like just 3 months of bare essential expenditure that you can grab at that is
Mm.
always there. Life insurance as someone that's self-employed, you know, critical illness, income protection. I take it from me, when you stop working, the bills mount up, and it's scary, um, which is difficult. I think people to have conversations with. Um, but yeah, those things are really important. But also in terms of how you feel around money is like when you start pinning, say, your ISA to a goal. I will have this. The frame of mind is no longer like, I'm missing out on something, because people view savings as missing out. They're sacrificing something. Actually, you're not. It's like, you're actually adding, you're giving yourself something in the future.
Mm.
The trade up is basically, I'm sacrificing a little bit of what I want now to get what I want in the future. The exercise I do for that is I'll get people to write out their future self about, what they look like, what they're going to earn, and the more they link to that in their mind, the better chances they've got to become and how they're going to feel when they become that person. Some people call it manifestation. There's a lot of psychology behind it, but whichever it is, don't really get into the semantics of what people want to call, that's up to them. But the point is, it's a doing thing. It's a practice of like, I want to get my mind into this. And that's a really important thing to do, is like, when you tie your ISA to a certain thing, to a certain outcome, and you achieve it, it's no longer a sacrifice. It's or I could buy this extra thing. It's like, well, no, I'm going to buy this in the future.
Mm.
So that's fine. And that's going to give me much more value, and it's going to have a much more intrinsic value because I'm putting this effort in. I realize the plan. It's good for self-esteem, I think. Probably much like the same when someone puts to a plan, all right, they may have a few slips, but it's not, when they've done it for 6 months, no matter what the outcome, I'd imagine your clients are like, actually, do you know what? I've stuck at it for 6 months, come hell shine, whatever's happened. And that in itself has, I think, a lot of value to your emotional state.
Yeah, I think everything you're saying there is huge. And there's, whether it's the idea of delayed gratification or future self, or you can do things in the present that make your life better. But the things you do in the present don't have to come at the cost of the future either. I think if you can find that balance, whether it's in the gym and your physical fitness, or it's with eating or with relationships, like I feel this is a point that comes with general content. If you
Yeah,
can enjoy your cup of coffee on a street corner, you'll enjoy it on a yacht. But if you're always waiting to enjoy it on the yacht and you don't actually enjoy what you have right now in this moment, then I think there's no point having an ISA. There's no point having a saving goal. There's no point wanting X, Y, and Z that aren't here if right now isn't appreciated. Does that
yeah.
sound trite, or would you say that's
No,
fair?
no, not at all. There's like there's loads of different like psychometric tests around money. And one is by Brad and Ted Clance, and they call it like there's money vigilance, which is like basically anxiety. You're never gonna have enough. And they save all the time. And I'm very much a money hypervigilant person. And then there's sort of like this sort of money worship, that I need this. I need to look like I've got money, which isn't actually having money. You'd be surprised how many very wealthy people have quite modest tastes at times.
Mm.
Like they'll buy the car, but only when they know it's like they're completely set, and they'll sacrifice the car for the house or the business without even blinking an eye, because they know that the car's just like it's a thing that will change with trends, whereas the business and the house and the things, they're very, very solid assets. The pension's a solid asset. They have a mind that is not quite, they don't really follow trends. It's one of the things I've noticed about people that are really good with money, is they don't follow trends. They tend to make decisions from core values, as opposed to I'm my wife calls me very condescending about this, or snobbish, but I think trends are for people that they don't, people that always following the latest trends in those different areas. I think it's because they don't know themselves very well and need to be told like constantly what you should like. Is like, well, as me, it's classic thing. So we were having our bathroom done, and I wanted these the black taps, and my wife's like, no, we need the chrome ones. And she's like, they're very in trend, the black ones. And what happens when they go out of trends? I said, like, well, I don't follow bathroom trends for a start. I'm not that guy. Right. It's just like, I don't. But look, get what you want. If you, my suburbs, like, look, they both look okay, and days and days and days. I said, look, I like the black ones. You want me to say I like the chrome ones more? I'm not going to do that, but get the chrome ones because you have a better eye. But the point was, it was like, look, I like those ones just because that just speaks to me. I've no idea about what bathroom trends or carpet trends or any of that stuff. I'm a very, very like plain person. I don't really do possessions that much. I like no clutter. But the interesting thing was I could still have them in 15 years. And as long as I'll probably need to replace them. I'm very clumsy. I'll drop things over, I scratch them all the time. But I would still be content if they were okay, because it's just a tap at the end of the day. I like the look of it and it's a nice bathroom, but I don't think, "Oh, I need to change that because it doesn't look nice now. And everyone else has got something else. It doesn't, and that's a way of spending money. That is a way of not investing money, is constantly keeping up with the next thing.
I was just going to say two things that I'm aware of, and it ties into exactly what you're saying, is that the very wealthy people almost counter signal. So may wear like your Steve Jobs-esque. Now, Steve Jobs did it for a mental load thing, but he always wore the same thing. But
Yeah.
it's not uncommon to see wealthy people wear your cos type clothes. So not many frills, not many patterns. and maybe look quite plain in some ways. Whereas there's an incredible YouTube account, and if I remember what it is, maybe I'll put it into the comments of this video. But he looks at how rappers and musicians go broke, and typically it's through signaling that they're wealthy. So paying for the yachts, the parties, the cars, the girls, whatever it is, this is all put on a credit card, or even having an advance for the studio. So an advance works that you are given money to record, and if you're good with your finances, hopefully you'll have something at the end of it to pay your basic needs. But people will sign these big contracts with big advances, and then we'll have to produce 3, 4, 5 albums and make a return on those. Otherwise, they're liable for the amount that they've been advanced.
Plus interest.
Plus interest. And again,
Yeah,
that's
nothing's
how
for free.
Nothing's
for free. I can't remember his name. Bernard. He was a boxer. I can't remember his name. Second, but anyway, he set up basically after his boxing career, he set up a sports agency where all boxers came to him, had to have legal advice, and they were given an accountant and financial advisor, because the amount of boxers that go broke, so like Mike Tyson, Vander Holyfield, tons just go broke because actually they just do stupid things with their money. And it's like all of these things, they don't invest wealth very well. And it's great to have the frivolity of wealth and the things, but it's got to be managed. So like of one of the wealthiest people I know, who's unfortunately not a client, but he's very, very successful. He sort of said like, yeah, he drives around in a Rolls Royce, and next year it might be a Ferrari. But he will actively say, he said, when I was building, it was a Ford Mondeo. That's all it was. It was a Ford Mondeo and that's it. Because he was like, well, I could have probably afforded it, but that $2,000 a month went into buying more stock for the business, which was then monetized. And how we use debt. There's a good saying I use: you can either monetize debt or debt will monetize you. So you buy a house, theoretically, you get a mortgage, it's debt, but the house will go up in value. Pretty much. You invest in a business that's going to earn you money and you buy stock and you sell it, you've monetized debt. But when you're talking about stuff like clothes, going out, holidays, you do too much of that, debt is monetizing you. Do you know what I mean? You're the product. Not the credit card isn't, you're the product. The credit card is what you use to purchase, but you're the actual product because you're being monetized by a company. And that's true of even a mortgage, but at least then you're coming out with an asset that's building your wealth. Or you're buying a business, and then the proceeds of that business are funding your life, and you're investing the proceeds and you're coming back, and you're creating something with passive income. But to buy something on credit that's just disposable and to do too much of it is financial suicide. You're the product, not the thing you're buying. You're the product of which is, I think when people explain it like that, they're like, well, I don't like being a product, but it's the truth because companies wouldn't do it unless they earn money.
So in California right now, if I watch a YouTube video, maybe a 20-minute YouTube video, I'm going to see ads every 4 minutes or so. And it's not just that they're double the number of ads in the UK, they're double the length as well before you can skip them. So I am obviously using something for free, but I'm the product because I'm now being sold at twice as much. Well, generally, in the UK, you're still going to have ads on your YouTube, but in America, it's even more so. It's basically 4 times the ads for using this free thing. So yeah, what it actually costs is your attention, your time, and people don't necessarily think that, but that's how we become the product.
That's the trick with money. I think that's the biggest trick that people don't realize. One of the things I talk about is teaching kids about money. So, and I don't actually teach them about I don't tell like a 5-year-old about an ISA, like what's the point? But there are traits that I think you develop. So one of them is future self, and it always starts with that because you won't delay gratification unless you have a goal to incentivize it. Why delay gratification without that? Because you're just saying, well, can you just delay gratification? Why? I don't know. I can't. I mean, I'm a pretty good salesman, and I can't sell that. Like, do you know what I mean? There's no value there. I say to someone, delay gratification. Why would I do that? I don't know, but it just sounds great. It doesn't work. But what do you want to be? But then the other thing is like teaching that actually there are different values to different things they engage in. So, for example, too much time watching the TV will not produce the same result as if my kids like engage in creative play or they help me do the garden or something like that. Parenting is I'm not going to go into parenting because that's a very personal thing, but the idea being is that how you use your time will produce money, because that's time and money are currency are linked. They are. Because what you do with your time and how you learn, people that invest in themselves usually end up richer because they're investing time, and that time then used to create something that is passive income, and they'll start to learn about things, and it's a really interesting trick that people don't realize is that actually time quite literally is money. That's why people pay you by the hour. And the trick of like, either increasing the amount you can charge per hour if you're in that market, or doing things that don't involve your time, is how you start to create money. So investing, things just grow on their own. You don't have to be there. It's just growing. So
Um,
that's the thing is how you monetize your time.
it sounds really clinical to put it into those terms, but I feel that, again, somebody who's self-employed, I have to think in these ways. When I was working in the gym, all the time that I spent in the gym was making money. But if I wanted to go on holiday, that's time not making money.
Yeah.
That's one way that you can think about that. And I think people get caught up in that trap of, well, I can't take a holiday because then I won't be making money. But then the flip side of that, the health side of that is, if I don't take time off, then I'm not going to be able to deliver the best service possible. That means that people stick
Absolutely.
with me.
Absolutely. And that is another thing, like working for myself. Like I'm probably a little bit like of a workaholic, and
Mm.
I will work through, and I have to like stop myself. Like for me, Huel's been you know, although not because it's like a particularly nice thing to drink, but it's just like I can make sure I eat and sustain, and if I don't eat and take at least half hour at lunch, I end up just eating crap
Mm.
because I'm so desperate for a sugar high, and it's like, no, I need to eat. And it's just those things of like taking time. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we go on, I do. One of the things I miss as I'm building my business is the regular holidays, because we used to take our kids away, on holidays, and you come back, and I got more done by resting
Yeah.
and just going, I'm turning the phone off. I'm not dealing with anything. I just need some downtime to just shut everything off. I don't want to think about anything. And it's like, okay, that you earn more doing that because you just won't be burnt out.
Oh, I think you've had a couple of life events, Naj, and I'm conscious of your time, and I wonder if maybe we plan in another episode in the future so we can kind of get into
Yeah,
some of
sure.
these more. But it feels to me that you've had moments in your life that have made you look at value in different ways, and
Yeah.
maybe the worth of things has shifted from monetary worth to a more spiritual, kind of emotional
Oh,
worth.
definitely, definitely. The idea of part of the business in 2020 was I wanted to do it for self-fulfillment. Win, lose,
Mm.
or draw, I wanted to see if I could do it, not because, not wholly because of the money. I'm not going to lie and say that isn't a factor, because it is. If you run your own business, you do it well, you can earn a lot of money. But it's like, well, I just didn't like what I was doing before. I was like, this is not me, and I could always go and do, if it doesn't work, I can go do something else. But it's that thing of like, there's an authenticity that I do value, and not everything that I value has a monetary, is a compensatory thing. It's just about, well, I decided to do it because there was a burning need to do it.
If you had to give like a phrase or an idea to get people started or thinking slightly differently on how they spend their time and their money.
Invest your time in your money relationship, and then your money relationship will invest in you.
Yeah. It's pennies and pounds, isn't it?
It's yeah. And the marginal gains thing of like, can I save 50 quid here? Can I save 50 quid there? All adds up.
Nice. If people want to get more nuggets of wisdom from you, Naj, where should they go?
So I do a lot of content on LinkedIn. I've got a Facebook page, and go to my website, 2020fp.co.uk.
Perfect. We'll
And
put
send me a message. Yeah. And I do a podcast called Dads in Business as well, which I'm going to start putting on YouTube at some point once I get myself organized to that extent. But yeah, um, yeah, that's it. That's me.
appreciate you, Naj.